Someone mentioned Ricky Gervais and his take on mental illness, and I found this little clip. I'm not sure if this is the clip the person was talking about. Remy. Let's see what Ricky has to say. There he goes again, bringing up trans people. Why can't you just leave them alone? What do you care? Yeah. Travis in the live stream chat's talking about a lot of these issues, mental issues can be solved through nutrition. I agree. Exercise, and having good parents. But I do think there is such thing as mental illness. I experience it every day. Well, every day that I go onto Discord and listen to people. Okay, so here we have a whole panel of Christians in really nice-looking suits, and they're sitting on nice chairs, and they're talking to nice people about various things. I don't know if I want to... I haven't listened to this before, but my guess is there's a lot of good stuff in here to comment on. But maybe we should just go straight to the mental illness part. Let's see if I can find it. Mental. Core fundamentals. Oh, here we go. There's no such thing as mental illness, says MacArthur. Okay, let's back it up. A few minutes. Let's see if that's good.
Is going to...
Because, you know, I want to get things in full context, of course.
Evangelize them to totally denigrate the God that they have grown up believing in.
I want to ask you a question here. He's written a lot of books, but his last book was The War on Children. Help our families navigate with the day we live in, and why you even wrote that.
Well, it's a combination of things. Just to lay it out simply, kids are sinful. I have great-grandchildren, and by the time they're 3 or 4, their sin nature is starting to be manifest.
Wait.
Ooh, kids are sinful. By age 3 or 4, it's starting to manifest. Does that mean if they die without fully comprehending the gospel, they go to hell?
Even in your grandchildren?
Even in my...
Okay.
So kids are sinful. Then you add to that the sins of the fathers are visited on the generations, the 3rd and the 4th generation. What does that mean? Simply means that the sinful characteristics of a given generation pass on to the subsequent generations. So that it's kids who basically have a sin nature to start with, and they have an inherited sin culture that they have to navigate and deal with.
Yeah, see, as an atheist naturalist, I would say there's truth in what he's saying. But it has nothing to do with sin. It has to do that if your parents screw up and make mistakes, it's going to affect you, the children.
That ought to be enough. But this culture has taken it a step further. And they are now targeting children.
Who's they?
The homosexuals say, we're coming after your kids. They're not trying to protect them. They're targeting them in the schools. They're targeting them through the media.
See, I tend not to be scared of homosexuals, although some of them can be a little scary. I think we need them for fashion and design. But I'm more scared of the woke left. And a lot of homosexuals are not woke left, by the way.
Disney and companies like that develop child entertainment are targeting children for really what amounts to moral and spiritual destruction.
He's not completely wrong. There was some executive for Disney admitted that she put in woke ideology or trans ideology. Bill Maher had a clip of it unabashedly, but she was a black woman and far left woke, and she said she could get away with it. Targeting children, putting that ideology wherever she could.
So this is a war on the children. I was thinking about another part of it the other day. I was reading a book, interesting book called A Profession Without Reason. It's a book that shows basically, this is pretty shocking to some of you, that psychiatry and psychology is finally admitting the noble lies that they've been telling for the last 100 years.
They've been admitting the noble lies. Does anybody know what he's talking about? What have they been admitting?
And the major noble lie is there is such a thing as mental illness. Now, this isn't new. You have Thomas Szasz back in the 1950s writing a book, who was a psychiatrist, on the myth of mental illness.
Here's a question for the audience. What is less wrong? Saying there's no mental illness, or saying everybody has mental illness? See, I would lean towards there being that everybody has mental illness, and it's just the matter of degree. And right now, if it's really bad, then we say it's mental illness. And if it's not so bad, then we say you're somewhat normal.
There's no such thing as PTSD. There's no such thing as OCD. There's no such thing as ADHD. Those are noble lies. To basically give the excuse to, in the end of the day, to medicate people. And Big Pharma is in charge of a lot of that.
Okay. He's not entirely wrong, correct? Well, let's put it this way. There's incentive for doctors and pharmaceutical companies to medicate people. Why? Because they can make more money. More doctor visits, more prescribed drugs. Even if you hate MacArthur and think he's totally wrong, that of course there's mental illness, I think you have to give him that there is a bias and an incentive to medicate people, when maybe it's not needed. See, the people who are suffering from mental illness right now and might be listening to this, they're going to be infuriated by MacArthur and maybe some of the things I say. But it doesn't infuriate me to hear MacArthur say there's no such thing as mental illness. I disagree with him, but I get the point that he's making, that it's gone too far, and he's just taking an extreme position on it and saying it's just a sinful nature. Well, we'll see what he has to say here.
If you understand, take PTSD for example. What that really is grief. You are fighting a war, you lost your buddies, you have a certain amount of survival guilt because you made it back, they didn't. How do you deal with the grief? Grief is a real thing. But grief is part of life. And if you can't navigate grief, you can't live life. But if you clinically define that, you can give them a pill, a series of medications, and they end up in LA homeless on the sidewalk.
He's not entirely wrong here. Now, I don't think PTSD is solely grief. It's like if they hear loud noises, they get anxiety attacks and stuff like that. But he's not totally wrong. You've experienced something and you don't know how to handle it in everyday life afterwards.
This is in regard to children, it's the most deadly thing that's been unleashed on children, medication. We're trying to make clear to parents that behavior is essentially the result of choices that kids make. And if you parent them properly, they'll make right choices.
See, this bothers a lot of people, but he's not wrong. I would phrase it a little differently, that if you parent your children properly, they're more likely to make better choices. And he's not wrong about that. In fact, the science supports what he's saying. I don't want to bring it up right now, but if you have an engaged father in the home, the percentage that you're going to suffer from any type of mental illness nosedives.
But if you blame it on something other than their choices, and you identify them as having something they can't do anything about, but medicate it, you literally are turning your child into a potential,
Drug addict.
not only a potential drug addict, but maybe a potential criminal.
Yeah. Like, I'm very hesitant about children going to psychiatrists or psychologists. Was it on Peter Boghossian's channel, Reed, that this was talked about? Because kids, when they go to a psychologist, they basically view the psychologist and the parents as gods, telling them what to do, what their problem is, and so forth, which is understandable because kids don't know much. Adults going to therapy is a completely different story because they can know at what point they don't need it anymore. But with kids, no, you have to come back. You have to, okay, you know best.
Because they never learn how to navigate life in a socially acceptable way. So the book deals with the ways in which children are being assaulted, and they're formidable because they're done by media, and they're in the hand of every kid through the cell phone.
Yeah, I'm coming from a completely different worldview than John MacArthur, but the sentiment he's giving, I don't disagree with. That it's very dangerous for kids to start medicating them at an early age. A lot of it can be solved with good parenting and just simple things like, 200,000 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. We were outside. We didn't evolve to be in boxes with wheels on it on an interstate just barely crawling in traffic. We weren't meant to sit in a room and look at a computer all day. We haven't evolved that way. And it makes people go crazy. Short fuse. I think mental illness would go down if we went back to rural communities, farming communities. People actually grow their own food, shovel their own manure, well, the animals' manure, get fresh air. You know, people go for walks, they go to the gym, but I don't know, it's not the same.
So the church has got to step up. We started a campaign called Grace for the Children. If you want to strengthen a church, and I know it's true here, if you want to strengthen a church,
Strengthen his
minister
children.
to the children. Let the parents know you're going to work to protect the children, which is the parents' greatest concern.
Yeah, and this is why the far right, despise the woke left. I mean, they hate you. When they think of the woke left, they think of the devil himself, Satan himself. Now, the woke left think that they're saving the children, they're saving society, they're helping people understand the inequalities that people face and the hardships that they face. But the people on the right, most parents lean right, by the way. They become mama bears, papa bears to protect their children, and they don't like you. They see a non-binary type dressed person with blue hair, a little pudgy around the edges. Get my child far away from that person. This is how they think. And I don't blame them. Is this the end?
So I wrote the book along those lines. I was telling the guys earlier that several Christian publishers passed on it, they wouldn't publish it, which shows you how woke even Christian publishing has become.
Yeah, you're saying that because if your name is on it, that book will do well, and they passed even on a business opportunity.
Yeah. If you sell 10,000 books, that's the publishers make money. That's good.
Mr. Science says there's utility in religion. I agree. There's a lot of practical benefits. Here's a question for non-theists, atheists who suffer from mental illness. If religion could solve your mental illness, and if you could force yourself to believe it, would you? Would you want to do that? If you could press a button, says, okay, I will believe this religion and it will take away my mental illness, would you do it?
In a first printing like this of 75,000 books, that's a huge financial benefit to a publisher. But they don't want that. Because again, we're back to what we've been talking about. They're trying not to offend the culture.
Yeah, and this is a parenting problem as well. If you raise children properly, in my opinion, they're less easily offended. Because they have a baseline of people that they know no matter what, well, mostly no matter what, they're going to be loved, protected, helped. And so when some goofball on the internet or some stranger on the street says something demeaning to them, so what? They know who they are, they have their identity, they're secure, they have traditions. See, and this is what religion can give people that atheism definitely can't. Maybe secular humanism can in some way, but it's going to be through things like golfing clubs, bowling leagues, which is not a good enough rallying point, in my opinion. If anybody wants to talk to me about this, tag me in the live stream chat and I'll let you in. Otherwise, I'm going to rewind it and see what else they have to say. That was the end of this.
How do we sort through those different issues in terms of what things are things that we, break fellowship over? What kinds of things are things where we can put our arms around someone and say, hey, this is a brother, we just disagree on this doctrinal point or this issue. So how do you sort through those different issues and how do you navigate relationships within the family of faith where we maybe don't fully align on issues?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, that it's important to understand that this culture encroaches on everybody in a massive way, so that people are making decisions not based upon Scripture, but based upon how they think they can successfully engage the culture. So they're not willing to offend the culture. They want to give in to the culture, as if, and this is kind of what I'm addressing in the last two sessions. If you think that your ability to accept the culture and have the culture accept you has anything to do with the advance of the kingdom of God, you're mistaken. But that's what drives it.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, John MacArthur, I believe, leans Calvinist. No, I think he doesn't lean Calvinist. I think he is a Calvinist. So his perspective on evangelism might be a little bit different than other Christians.
They don't want to offend the culture needlessly, and that needlessly can extend far beyond what it ought to. So
yeah, Calvinist Christian loves offending the culture. It gives them a dopamine hit.
So at that point, there is necessarily going to be a shift in the intensity of relationships. It doesn't change how I feel about people, whether I consider them friends. have affection for them. But obviously, when everything is publicly discussed on the internet, it's easy for people to appear to be pitted against each other. But I don't want, anything that is not a cardinal issue. I don't want to be the guy that broke fellowship with a fellow believer or brother in Christ. But at the same time, I can't give in to the culture. The culture has no influence on me in terms of what I understand my ministry to be. But it does have this is the legacy of pragmatism. It's been around for 20 years or more. Being pragmatic, trying to reach the unconverted by some form of technique or style. It's gotten so severe now. You saw probably some of the stuff on the internet about Easter Sunday services. There were just, what was it? One of them was recently was a sword swallower, a male stripper or something like that.
Yeah, he's not wrong here either. I went to a seeker-sensitive church for 4 years, Willow Creek model, if anybody's familiar with that. And biblically speaking, it's not church. It's not the edifying of believers, the worship of God. It's to get people to come and be entertained, and then maybe hear a good moral lesson. And I think that's what John MacArthur is talking about here. So as an atheist, I respect that. I respect saying, hey, we're not here to entertain you. We're here to tell you the truth. This is from their perspective. And if you don't like it, fine. If you reject it, fine. But we're not here to just cater to your feelings. Okay, someone called in here. I'm suspicious. Hey, can you hear me? Hi there.
Let's see.
And then you left. People always call in their phones. And then they have bad connections. I hate mobile phones. I hate smartphones. Here, he's back.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Hopefully not too much noise.
Yeah, it's much better now. What do you want to say, ask?
So I think I'm somebody who you'd say suffers from mental illness. I tend to lean progressive, but of course we'll have things that align with some conservative principles.
Well, I don't say that just because you're progressive, you have mental illness.
Oh, okay.
But I do think never mind. So you don't have any. Have you ever been diagnosed with mental illness from a professional?
No, not at
all. Okay. I
don't think so.
Okay.
I might have been picking up on some language maybe used before. I'm kind of curious to pick your brain and maybe help organize my thoughts though. I notice worrying about the fact that people are offended is really important to you. And I grew up really listening to people that I felt offended others. So I can totally align with you on that. I think,
that I'm okay with it. That I'm okay with offending people.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm okay with offending people too. I guess I would rather have free speech, more often than not. But why do you feel so worried about how progressives feel offended? I think they can handle it. I think what they're trying to argue for is a society where people who have been shunned, a clear example would be your multiracial marriage before would have been seen as something that people would not be okay with, and it's because of people fighting for and arguing for those kinds of sensible cultural norms that people can feel comfortable with those kinds of relationships. And I think you can obviously go overboard. I don't want to see
so your question to me is, why am I worried about people who get offended? Well, I don't.
Yeah,
I actually like it. Okay. I like because to me, it's an opportunity for people to grow and get stronger.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like I want there to be like a forum for discussion, right?
Yeah.
And but what, I guess what I'm getting at, and maybe I'm missing a point, but it seems like that it bothers you that some people do get offended. Like it's a point that you've brought up multiple times.
Yeah. Well, it bothers me, but probably not in the way that you think. It bothers me that
Okay.
people, it'd be the same thing as the morbidly obese people offend me. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's like, come on, eat less, go to the gym already.
Okay.
And I could stand to lose 20 pounds too, by the way. So,
Yeah, me too.
and I was sick for a long time, and now I'm back on my routine. But so I just view it as I have a weakness personally with other people's weaknesses.
I see. So so if I could just repeat back what you're saying, it kind of like annoys you in the sense of like it's something that you don't want to see in others. Like when people are easily offended, that's not something you like to see.
Yeah, it makes for a horrible society, and we're witnessing it today, like on university campuses all across the United States, or in some places. It's this feel sorry forism, this you owe me my rights, and they kind of forget about responsibilities. Don't say this because it will offend me. Let men into women's sports because it's unfair if you don't. All this sort of thing.
I wonder like how much of that is like some loudspeaker. Then like if I guess what I'm saying is like if you were to go like from person to person on the street and like really ask them about it, and they share a one-on-one, like truthfully, not feeling like they have to talk for the camera. I really wonder how much of that is like actually real.
30%.
Where do you get that number?
Gallup poll on the topic of, let's say, trans men in women's sports. 70% are against, 30% are for. And my guess is the vast, vast, vast majority of that 30% are what I would call woke left.
Okay.
So yeah, it's probably under 30%, but I'd say it's north of 20% for sure.
I really feel like that's probably pretty high. I would probably have to see the data and really understand the question, but I guess we could roll with that. So kind of diving deep, like you feel like that's a problem for the nation. Like, could you explain like how that would be a problem? Like what's the core issue?
Well, when you have kids and
Yeah.
and you're in a big city, it's not so much smaller cities that have this problem. Well, actually, no, that's not true anymore. And you have a boy in your daughter's bathroom, or you have a boy running against your daughter in a race. I think that's a problem.
Oh, you're talking about a specific issue. I'm kind of talking about like the fact that you said that people are offended and they're.
Oh, just
they're
in
going
general?
after.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, in general, the problem is that when you're trying to figure out what's true, when you're trying to figure out what's the best policies to run a nation,
Yeah.
if you're constantly having to walk on eggshells for fear of offending someone, it makes it really difficult to figure out what's true. It makes it very difficult to have conversations. People, the woke left won't even talk to people most of the time. They'll just huddle into their little bubbles and build walls.
I haven't really met too many people. Maybe we're talking to two different like groups of people, and I just feel comfortable talking to who you call Will.
Well, I've experienced it firsthand. But then what happens is anything I experience firsthand, they very rarely will talk to me the second time.
I would probably say that you'd classify me as woke.
Well, it's a sliding scale. You might only be 50% woke.
Oh, okay.
I would have to diagnose you first.
Got it.
Are you okay with trans women playing in women's sports?
Yeah, I don't think that's like a really important topic.
That's
Like
not what I asked you. I didn't ask you if it was important or not. I asked you, would you support legislation that banned?
but what kind of legislation would how would that work? It's like, it's like these like weird,
Like, for example,
thought
Title IX.
experiments.
Title IX was recently modified to include gender identity. That you can't discriminate based on gender identity when it comes to sports.
Okay, so like how would that work? Like,
So you make a
you'd
law.
have a problem if like your daughter was on a soccer team and like a boy her age was playing on the team.
Yes. So right now,
But why?
why what?
But why would you have a problem with that? Like, what is the issue?
Because boys and men are superior to girls and women when it comes to
Oh, okay.
athletics. You are not aware of that?
I didn't know that.
What?
I didn't know that. Like,
You're
the game
joking,
of, like,
right?
In the game of soccer, like a group of kids are playing for fun. Like, you feel like it wouldn't be okay for boys and girls to play.
Well, no, there can be definitely boys and girls playing together, but I'm talking competitively. Like there's
Like a professional.
no,
like a professional sport?
I'm talking elementary school kids. They have soccer teams and they go from
Yeah.
school to school and they play against each other. Are you unaware of these things?
Yeah, like
Okay.
you're talking about like a high school.
Like
kind of
no, even elementary and junior high.
Okay.
So if you're talking about like gym class or whatever, that's that's fine. But even then, you can have injuries and so forth. But you are aware that even boys are dominant over girls at the age 6, 7, 8 age range, correct?
You mean like you mean like in terms of strength and speed and
Yeah.
and stuff? Yeah. Like if you took like the two classes, right, and you had like the Gaussian distributions, right? You'd find in general like boys tend to be bigger. I mean, this is like a biological fact from our ancestral history, right? Like in general, like
Okay, so you are
males-
aware of it.
Yeah, I wonder if like maybe like the way you're wording it is a little off, but in general, I'll kind of repeat it. Like in general,
Okay.
men tend to be bigger and
Right.
yeah.
I'm just trying to gauge how woke you are. So
Oh, okay.
So I become president of the United States, and I take Title IX, and I say women's sports are women's sports based on the sex you were born, and we don't care about your gender identity. Would you support? Would you support a legislation like that?
No, like that seems like it's
Okay.
like just you're just pulling it out of nowhere. Like what is the point of it, right? Like
The point of it is to have women in women's sports and girls in girls' sports.
Important? Why is that so important to you?
Fairness and protection of women.
Fairness and protection of you. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we just like maybe like focus on the fairness, because I think it's like probably the weakest argument.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to gauge how woke you are, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But
Okay,
we
that's
can
fine.
talk about that if you want. So
Yeah, no, it's okay. Like that's fine.
you tend to be very woke on that issue. So you're now above 50%.
No, I would say that I'm not, though. And the reason why I'm like bringing it up is like, why is it so important to you? Kind of going back to my earlier point, like of all the things that you can like focus on, like I'm just trying to understand.
Because I think it's
why
highly
is that-
unfair and dangerous for men and boys to be in girls and women's sports. That's why. Now you can disagree with me. That's fine.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
we could spend half an hour talking about it. But I want to
That's
get
probably
I want to
not
get
fun.
I want to get to other issues.
Let's do it.
Do you think from kindergarten through grade 4 that topics like gender identity, non-binary, homosexuality should be talked about from K through grade 4 by public schools?
Like in what sense? Like taught as lessons? Like when
Yeah.
does that even happen? Right? Like don't you start going through like sex ed from 5 to 6? I would say like you don't start like.
So
in
the
public
question is,
schools, right?
would you support a teacher who started talking about that sort of thing in her class? Usually it's women who talk about these things at that age. Would you support that teacher doing that?
Where did you pull
The question isn't where. The question
no, I'm
is,
just saying, like, I'm just curious where you pulled that out of. Like,
if that happened, would you say that's a good thing or a bad thing?
no, I'd say like talking about sex in general, like at that age, is probably not.
We're not talking about
appropriate,
we're,
right?
we're
Like,
not talking about
we
coitus or
censor.
anything. It's not coitus. It's just saying, hey, some people are not a boy, not a girl. They're non-binary. That sort of thing. I'm not talking about like explicit sex stuff. But would you support a teacher talking about that sort of thing?
So like, I mean, it's kind of weird, but I would say I guess it's okay if a teacher talked about it, but again, that's like really weird to be talking about.
Okay, so
like,
you would say
you
it's
know,
okay
identity.
for a teacher to talk about non-binary stuff, gender identity stuff,
I would
and
say
K
like
through
it's
4.
weird to start talking about things that probably kids don't start talking about until they're going to start being a teenager, and where they might start to have those kinds of thoughts. But I could be wrong. Like I don't consider myself. I've never had the thought like I'm not a man, or I'm not
So
a
I just
boy,
want to
so
get your
I
answer
don't
on
know.
that question. You hear a teacher
Let
talk about non-binary or trans
yeah,
issues.
I'll lean yes, that I'm okay with that, just from the sense.
Okay.
Like, as I said before,
That's where
I
that's where
tend to
10
be okay with offended people.
that's where 10 that's worth 10 woke points, and then you had 10
Okay.
woke points for the sports
The
thing.
sports?
So you're at
Okay.
you're at 70% woke right now.
Dang.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good.
If a person's at a university campus,
Yeah.
and they have a sign that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers,
Children.
and you see a person run up to them and start swearing at them,
Okay.
do you think that's good behavior or bad behavior?
Children cannot consent to.
So a guy's wearing a sign
Yeah.
that says children can't consent to puberty blockers, and then you see people shout this person down.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, like in general, right? They should be able to. The person holding the sign should be able to voice their opinion. So I would lean that that's bad for somebody to be yelling at them.
Okay, that's subtract 5 woke points. So you're down to 65%
But-
woke.
Okay. Okay, sure. Go ahead. This is fun.
Who do you typically feel more sorry for?
I like walking into your traps, by the way. This is fun.
If I give you an African American, a
Okay.
Native American, an Asian, or a white European, out of those 4 people, who do you feel the most sorry for?
That question doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I feel sorry for anybody just based on that information?
Oh, very good. -5. Great answer. -5 woke points. You're down to 60% woke. So in other words, you don't just feel sorry for people based on their skin color.
No, I mean, I don't think most people that you would call woke would say that.
Okay. So if you don't feel sorry for people based on their skin color,
Yeah.
are you for letting people into colleges based on their skin color? All else
Yeah.
equal. All else
Yeah.
equal.
Yeah, for a limited time, yeah, I would say yes.
Oh, you are for it based on skin color.
I'm saying I would be okay with not from skin color. I would say
But that's my question.
Okay, so then no.
So we got 2
color.
people, same GPA, same high school community involvement, all same. And then the only difference is one's
Just
black,
as the
one's.
question as you've posed
Okay.
it, no.
You would not be for that.
No, the way that you pose the question, no.
Okay. I'm going to deduct another 5 woke points. You're at 55% woke.
Okay.
Good for you. So affirmative action based on race, you're against?
Affirmative action based on race. Yeah, I think I'm for it for some time.
Wait,
Yes.
hang on. You're contradicting yourself, I think. You are for
Maybe.
affirmative action based on race.
I'm for affirmative action. Oh, I missed that part. Okay, so I'm for affirmative action if it's a little bit more complex than what you've kind of laid out.
Okay, based on race, which means outward appearance.
That would no what I don't want to get into like all this. Let's just say the answer is no. Just to kind of keep things moving along. Lean no.
You lean no. Okay. Did you support the overturning of affirmative action by the Supreme Court based on race?
I think at some point it would need to happen, but I wasn't ready for it. That's kind of like why I didn't want to get into that conflict.
You weren't ready for it? What do you mean?
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it. What I mean is like I don't feel like enough time has passed for like the original goal of affirmative action to like work its way through the system. Like if you're saying that it should have never been there, then I disagree with you. If you're saying that eventually, like maybe now is the right time, I would probably be more ready to listen to your side.
Oh, so the time has come where we don't need affirmative action based
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm saying that we haven't arrived there yet, but maybe we have. Maybe I'm just behind the times.
Well, we haven't arrived there, or we have arrived that we don't need affirmative action?
I don't think we've arrived there yet. Personally speaking, I don't think we're there yet. But
Okay, so if we
I
haven't,
think at some point,
if we haven't arrived at that point yet, shouldn't you support affirmative action based on race?
No, because at some point I'm saying that we would have to phase that out. And
I know,
like,
but right now,
I think in theory, I agree with you. Like we should not be.
in theory, you agree with me, but right now, given our
Yeah.
current climate, cultural climate, do you
Yeah.
think affirmative action based on race should exist?
Again, you're just like adding the just based on race
Yeah.
solely. It's more complicated than that, right?
I know this question is just based on race.
Then,
not
yeah, again, lean no. If it's like if you just keep it simple, like if we're talking like simple models, then yeah, like the simple models will win. But like once we actually like add more context, of course, it becomes more complicated.
Okay, I feel like you're kind of giving me contradictory answers, but I'll leave you at so far at 55% woke.
Okay.
Do you believe in equality of outcomes?
Could you explain what you mean? Equality of outcomes?
Do you think that we as a society should strive for everybody to
No.
achieve the same things?
No, like we want a diverse, like I think in general, right? We want diverse. We want to set up like a platform or an environment where people can do their best, but it's impossible to in such a like complex society to expect that we can have everybody like on the same outcomes. We know that doesn't work like in even simpler systems, so that's just not like reasonable to think that that's actually feasible.
Okay. I'm a upper middle class white male.
Okay.
What would you say if you were to give a pie chart of percentages, and we say we're just looking at 2 criteria. The first criteria is my white privilege. The second criteria is everything else, my achievements, my working hard, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Can you allocate percentages on my success?
I mean, I think like in general, it's gonna fall mostly on like the latter part. I think like I would consider
60,
myself a
60, 40, 70, 30?
No, probably no. Like if you force me to have like a number, I would probably lean more towards maybe 10-90, where like 90% of it comes from
Oh, okay. Great answer. You're down to 50% woke. You were as high as 65, but you're chiseling your way down. So you're saying the success that I've achieved in life is because of the things I've done and not so much my white privilege. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, I mean, we know that to be like true because the majority of the country is white. So that would mean that it would be disproportionately like if you looked at the data, it would be disproportionately the case that only like white males are successful. There's definitely like a bias, right? So the system is in place such that like we enjoy certain privileges, but at the end of the day, like.
But it's only maybe 1/10 of explanation for the results.
Yeah, and I'm just pulling that number out of thin air. Like,
yeah, I understand. No, but it gives me a sense of where you're coming from.
Okay.
Yeah, you're starting to sound like a conservative. So would you then say a African American in a really bad situation in Detroit, let's say, and I'm going to ask the same question. What percentage do you think is because of their bad choices, the choices they made, and what percentage is because, let's say, systemic racism? Those are your two choices.
So what's the questions?
How would you allocate the percentage for the reason why they're in a bad situation? 90-10.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
So you're saying it's 90% the African American's fault?
I mean, that's weird wording, but I'd say it's again the same kind of thing.
Oh, your wife's not going to like you if she listens to this. Are you married?
Yeah, I am. I have 2 kids.
Okay. Oh, that's five -5 woke points right there. You're down to 45% woke.
Now I'm offended.
If you're married with kids, I mean, yeah, right there. Because most woke people are non-married with no kids.
Oh, okay. Well, here's an anecdote for you, then, where that's not the case.
Okay, you and I run a business together, and it's a big, successful business, and we have a board of directors, 13 of them.
Okay.
What percentage should be men, women, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter, right? Like we want to go off of what's best for the business.
Oh, -5 woke points. You're down to 40% woke. Because
I guess like what
aren't you for diversity?
I am. That's what I'm saying is like, shouldn't we be also like trying to like pass legislation to ensure though that like these sorts of things aren't happening? Like we want to make sure that the laws are written such that you don't have discrimination possible. But at the end of the day, right, like the individuals that will put in the work to like reach wherever they're trying to go, that's on them. Like it doesn't make sense to kind of like work backwards or top down. Like we want to make sure that the platform or the environment is such that like we're not making anybody disadvantaged. At the same time, like it doesn't make sense to like impose those laws top down.
Okay, but you would still say the best people should do the job no matter what skin color or sex.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Like we just said also that we were 2 businessmen, right? So of course I would be biased for promoting the business. So I want whoever would be the best. So
see, the thing, we might be different here.
Why would race and sex like play into it? I wouldn't see that there would be like any reason.
I don't think race should play into it, but I do think maybe sex should.
Why is that?
Because I think men and women are different.
I think they're different too, but
so maybe, but you can have a black person different than another black person, come from a completely different culture and background, but women tend to be different than men. I mean, much different. Well, they might be more compassionate, less risk-taking. Men tend to be more risk-taking.
Yeah, that's true in the fact that like 90% of violent crime is accounted for by men.
Yeah, and men tend to work better when there's. I think they've done studies on this. If you have 3 men and you check out their productivity, and then you put 1 woman with those 3 men, their productivity goes up. But if you put 3 women together, their productivity goes way down.
I mean, like we would have to like accept that as like a premise to move forward, but I'm not aware of the data, and I'm not really.
So you and I are different here. I might go as a policy to have some women on the board, but my preference would be for trans women because, I mean, then you get the testosterone.
Oh, okay. What do you think about what do you think about the idea that like having diverse like backgrounds like makes you stronger as a business, in that you know you might have blind spots that you can account for with a diverse set
Sure.
of backgrounds.
Yeah, I'm all for diversity of ideas, especially in industries that require creativity. But if you're doing diversity based on skin shade, then no.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm kind of like starting to run out of time because I've got to get home and check back in on work. But is there anything like I can answer? I don't have any other questions for you. My original question was more about like why you focus on offense, but it sounds like I understand you better now.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're not as woke as I once feared. There is hope for you. My guess is your wife more or less woke than you, do you think?
No, probably less.
Oh, really?
Yeah, probably.
So she wears the pants in the family.
No, definitely not. I wouldn't say that.
Or what makes you think she's less woke than you?
I think if you were to run those questions again, maybe like
You think she would answer differently than you on any of those questions?
I don't know. I would have to play it back in my head, but I'd say like just a gut check. I would say less woke than me.
Okay, so this is what you do when you get home tonight,
Okay.
or on your next date night. Get a big screen TV and watch this. Play this back, and then
Okay.
have her answer each of my questions and see if you guys are simpatico. If you give the same answers,
Got it.
and then if it causes division in your marriage, don't blame me. That's your own fault.
Definitely.
And then maybe call back with your wife if you had major differences.
Yeah, that's a interesting idea. Okay, thanks for the time, PineCreek.
Yep. Thanks for being cordial, nice. You're one of the nicest 40% woke person I've ever talked to.
I'll take that as a compliment. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. I mean, where's the end to that? As if that had anything to do with the kingdom at all. So I think the first breach comes when people feel like they have to give in to the culture. That was huge with CRT and the racial hustlers and the race
CRT stands for critical race theory for those of you from Nebraska.
baiters. They wreaked havoc in evangelical leadership because people caved into that.
I'll just kind of piggyback on that. From a local pastor standpoint, we use concentric circles with our elders. We talk about our core fundamentals, the things that we hold to, the friends that we're going to run with, the ministries and the missionaries we're going to support. And then you have other layers in the concentric circles. I'll give you an example of one just this past week. I would consider him maybe on the outer layers of my concentric circles. He is a Pentecostal pastor in my area. He has a woman pastor wife. We've had a lot of personal discussion about it. And yet, in our area, where there's a ton of mega churches and the multi-campus guy on a screen type stuff, one of the big church planters this week, real influential guy, had 1,000 people at his vision night for the church plant. He's planting out of a majorly influential church over in the East Valley. And he went rogue on abortion and started saying, well, there's cases and we need to have conversations. It's a hard pill to swallow. Oh. And it happened to be my Pentecostal friend there with his woman pastor wife, and we don't agree on those things, who
By the way, women can be teachers in the church as long as they're teaching other women. That's the standard face value biblical interpretation of it. So if you're an atheist, you say, oh, you're a woman, you can't teach, you can't speak, that's false. And especially if you say that in a non-church setting, women can talk and teach whatever they want. So atheists, stop saying, "Oh, you're a woman, shut up. You're a Christian woman, don't talk." Paul said to be silent. Even if you take the traditional view, that doesn't apply.
Hit this brother pretty hard and had a strong talk with him and said something publicly. And I said, you know, you're in that seeker kind of mega church driven world. He's a church of 7,000 people, this Pentecostal brother, and loves the gospel, does not preach heresy, but we differ obviously on very important local church things. And I sent him a text and I said, why is it that you, my charismatic woman, pastor, wife, friend over there from Mesa, why is it that you're going to be the other last man standing on this issue? Like, really? And he was laughing back. And we sort of have these chuckles. You're seeing guys who we certainly are across the aisle on major issues. Those are serious local church issues. But I think when you see those...
Man in Charge asked, do you fit in more with conservative evangelicals or woke atheists? I would say definitely conservative evangelicals on political issues. I just view a lot of their explanations as, you know, problems in the world because of sin and the Satan and the devil tempting and fallen nature and all that. I just chalk that up to humans making bad choices. But yeah, on politics, personal responsibility, and that sort of thing, conservative evangelicals and I probably be in line on most things. And there's so many sticks up, so many atheist butts that they hear that and think they're just the gasp. I've heard atheists gasp at that. Well, the evangelical conservative people, they're evil. You're lining yourself up with evil people.
Those compromises, I look at those concentric circles and I'm thankful that he would say something. Now, would I put him in my pulpit and say, hey, come on the podcast and just share your view on ecclesiology? May it never be. Then there's other layers.
It's a good reason to use the word, Meganita.
Yeah, it is.
Never on my podcast.
So those circles get tighter and tighter. And what this heightens for us is the importance of the local church. I love talking with my elders about these things. I love talking with friends. Johnny will regularly be in the pulpit. I was just with him there. We love to come here. So we try to not torch everyone and try to use those concentric circles. I think, Pastor Don, you've been a great example of this, the podcast.
This guy here looks like he should go into politics. He has that Kennedy face.
Yes, that the team did about Jack Hayford and your relationship. You went there to preach, but he wasn't exactly a regular during the equipping hour at Grace Community in the early days. And so there's layers to it, and you got to know when to fight on major issues and maybe when to put somebody in a different category and love them from a healthy distance would be just some of my thoughts.
It sounds like you're speaking specifically to people that are in ministry. Our relationship with when we break fellowship over someone who's a fellow pastor, which would be different than someone that maybe has grown up their entire life.
Skull 144 asks a great question. Why are there so few atheist conservatives? I would say in the United States, the reason is because the United States started at a 90% Christian nation, some form of Christianity. And now that's down to 60%. And so a lot of former Christians have now become atheists, and there's a hole in their heart. They need hope, meaning, and purpose. They need something to drive them, something to a mission statement. And so they've clung on to something called secular humanism or wokeness. The feeling they get from being sympathetic or feeling sorry for the oppressed minority class gives them a dopamine hit, or it just makes them feel good and that they're making a difference in the world, and that has become their new religion. And those people tend to lean left.
Life in a certain church demographic and has known nothing other than the environment that they've grown up in. Because sometimes, growing up in a solid church, I thought people that were on a different theological page than I am had compromised to get there. And that's not always the truth at all. I think that if you're in a healthy church and you've grown up in a healthy church, that's the grace of God in your life. And so sometimes I think we also, depending on the severity of the issue, need to have compassion for people that haven't grown up in a church that teaches them the Bible, rather than thinking, man, they've compromised the clarity of the Word of God. I've been around people for the last 10 years that, how will they know without a preacher? Sometimes applies to someone growing up in Santa Barbara that doesn't go to a healthy Bible teaching church. And so that's why
our sermons go up online, and there's many people who don't attend Grace Church of the Valley who listen to you week in and week out. And I'm curious just to hear from you, gentlemen, what role should online resources, or in your case, Pastor John, even over the radio, what role should those kinds of resources take in our own discipleship, and how does that fit in with the role of the local church? So for the individual believer kind of sorting through what's, discipling me, where would they see Dial In or For the Gospel or Grace to You fitting into that equation?
What kind of question is that? Yeah, see, they don't even understand the question.
But everybody understood this was in demand. And look, we proclaim the truth, and as I said earlier, you take care of the depth of it, and God will decide how far it goes. But I've never felt like it was my job to run around and spread myself. I've always waited until somebody asked, somebody offered and said, we want to do this, we need to do this. And I think the truth of the matter is the extent of that is determined by its impact in people's lives. And you have to understand, but it was so the idea at the church, Grace Church, was we have shut-ins who can't come. We need to make a tape. So they reel-to-reel tape. It was maybe a year into this thing that cassettes showed up. And they said, we want to give these cassettes to people who are ill and send them to our missionaries and blah, 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 blah. So those cassettes started floating around for a while. And all of a sudden we got a call from Baltimore, Maryland, because people were saying, we really appreciate your radio ministry. And we thought, we don't even have a radio ministry. What are they talking about? It turned out that there's a really an old radio station in Baltimore, WRBS, that just took one of the cassette tapes at night, 9 o'clock, and played it for an hour.
Ooh, copyright law.
It wasn't a radio program, it was just the sermon.
How we view things and how it started in a similar sense. And one of the things that for me was the testimony coming out of the prosperity gospel and all of that, sort of minding my own business and enjoying my pastor, our church, discipleship. I'd make little trips up to Grace to You, and Travis Allen and Jay Flowers would take me to lunch and help me quantify things behind the scenes. I got baptized. I had a lot of just discipleship. And then slowly but surely people would say, what's your name? I'm Costi. Costi what? Costi.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what the prosperity gospel is, it's basically that God is going to promise you money if you do certain things. I actually saw Mike Winger talk about Benny Hinn recently. Oh, yeah.
You have attacked me, your children will pay for it. I place a curse on every man and every woman who dares to speak a word against this ministry. I curse that man.
Benny Hinn is evil. He's doing this to scare his critics down.
Oh, okay. This might get me in trouble.
You have attacked me, your children will pay for it. I place a curse on every man and every woman who dares to speak a word against this ministry. I curse that man.
Benny Hinn is evil. He's doing this to scare his critics down. So if you're actually part of a group, let's say that follows Benny Hinn, a church where he comes to speak, and this is in the 90s, and you go, guys, he said something that wasn't biblical. And then someone turns to you and goes, you don't dare say something against Benny Hinn. Your children will pay for it.
Yeah. I heard this, and the first thing that popped in my head is, do not dare say anything negative against the prophets in the Old Testament. If you do this, don't dare blaspheme the Holy Spirit. If you do this, it's better your body's crushed in a vice than you lose your soul. The scare tactics that Benny Hinn uses here is not that different than the scare tactics Jesus and Yahweh use. Am I wrong? See, a guy like Mike Winger would say, well, Doug, that's God. The other case is Benny. Who are you going to trust? Who are you going to call? Benny or God? You can't compare the two. Doug, that's a category error. But I agree with Mike Winger. In terms of Benny, this is a scare tactic that either really young people or really old people tend to fall for.
He's doing this to control and silence dissent. Satan would love it if you looked to Benny
See, Benny Hinn is a bit woke.
Hinn as the face of Christianity. Benny's teaching the love of money. He's teaching false prophecy to the people of God, while his obvious fakery tells the world that if he's the face of Christianity, then Christianity ain't nothing.
You have attacked me, your children.
Ain't nothing. What else is here? Benny Hinn is trying to silence me.
On the victims of Benny Hinn, because this man's hurting people, leaving people destitute, abusing sick and ill people as props.
See, here's an example of something an atheist like myself and an evangelical Christian like Mike Winger can agree on. We both agree that Benny Hinn is a sick old man who's taking advantage of people.
To bring glory to himself, deceiving people. Really bad stuff. That's my impression. That's my best understanding of the evidence I presented in that big 4-hour video. It's been making waves.
This video is just brutal. We got to call a spade a spade. Mm-hmm. This has gotten out of control, and I'm grateful for the work of Mike Winger putting this together. This right here, I think if there's ever a case of someone just flat out getting it wrong over and over and over and over and over and over.
Oh, see, Andrew Hamilton, isn't it interesting how everything falls together? And I don't know why. Did I subconsciously know that the guy on this panel here is Benny Hinn's nephew? I wonder what he thinks of his uncle.
Over and over and over again, and never repenting for it. And so my question to supporters of him is, like, how naive are you?
And you're going to tune out? Yes, categorically, without question, Benny Hinn must repent, at the very least, of carnal, manipulative fundraising, which he himself has renounced, but has gone back to again and again, and at the very least of false prophecies that were given without accountability or public repentance or change. At the very least, those two things.
I refuse.
Yeah. Crossover Maniac, thank you so much for the donation. And how many young boys were slaughtered by a pair of bears summoned by the Old Testament prophet for making fun of his baldness again? Yeah, Benny Hinn is like that. Which prophet was that? Was that Elijah? I think it was, right?
To watch anything of Benny Hinn until he publicly repents.
We're going to talk about Mike Winger laying a masterful 4-hour class against Benny Hinn. It's something you want to watch. False doctrine.
Heart, I still knew something was wrong until I realized Benny.
This is like New York. I knew something was wrong. I'm gonna send my boys over.
Benny Hinn never truly repented. Mike Winger released a video short this week, and I'm going to show it to you right now. If you think Benny Hinn's influence has waned because he's not on TV that much anymore, you are sadly mistaken. He has 4 million followers on Facebook and has 700,000 followers on YouTube.
Yeah, that's true. I looked that up earlier, but the thing is, he's only getting like 4,000 views per video, and isn't he from India? It would not shock me that a lot of the followers on Facebook and YouTube for Benny Hinn are fake. Like, that's not shocking to say, right? So I actually think Benny Hinn's influence on the real world is, at this point, pretty low.
To get my content removed from the internet, and I have proof of this, right? Because what happens is this: if you try to get someone's video removed and it doesn't work through the automated system, you can then appeal that decision and tell YouTube, no, really, you should really remove this video, and you have to write out an appeal and explain in detail. If you do that and YouTube rejects that appeal, guess what they do? They send all that information over to the person who made the video. That's me. Yep. So here's what happened. Benny Hinn had his representative, and his name's on it. I'll show you guys some images. I'm going to actually walk through it. I'm going to read to you the email that YouTube sent me that gives me the full explanation, all the details about what happened with my video and the claims from Benny Hinn. So starting off, YouTube says, hey, there was...
Yeah, I don't know if I'm that interested in that. Mike Winger's kind of using this as the big bad evil YouTube people. Well, I shouldn't say that. But Mike, you're big enough. You're way bigger than Benny Hinn at this point. Benny Hinn is dead man walking. So I wouldn't worry about him. But I've noticed that in the first couple years of my YouTube channel, I would get some videos demonetized, and it doesn't happen anymore. And I've said some raunchy stuff. I talk about penises and vaginas and retards and trans women are not real women, and what else? Talk about rape. Some people say grape instead of rape. I don't say grape, I say rape. And I bet you anything, this video is going to be fine. How come I can get away with it? I don't know. Maybe because I'm a conservative atheist, and YouTube loves conservative atheists. By the way, anybody can call in.
Costian. Oh, and there were two responses. One was either like, oh, what an unfortunate last name. You know, you got the same last name as some crazy faith healer. You know that? You ever heard of Benny Hinn? I go, yeah, tell me more, you know, that kind of thing. And then I'd tell them and they'd go, what in the world? Or people would say, Costi Hinn, you related to Benny? It's like, yeah, he's my uncle. They're like, what in the world are you doing at a Bible church? One time at Shepherd's Conference, a guy I played baseball with, last time we ever talked, I was living for the world, driving a Hummer in that whole world. And he was from the Inland Empire, California, down in Southern California, and he sees me from the second level at Shepherd's Conference. I'm on the Grace Walk, and he looks through the window, and I happen to just look up, and he was staring at me through the window, and he was shocked. So he comes running down, and he goes, what are you doing here? And I was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, I grew up in this world. What are you doing here? And turns out he was a kid from a solid church, and so it was sort of the shock factor that would lead to conversations.
Resources. I grew up in a healthy church with a great pastor, and I would say in a healthy church with a great pastor, with access to the pastor whenever I wanted, I left Bible college and had more questions than when I began.
Yeah.
And
Don't
I would
doubt
say
it.
for the next 2 years, I was putting in maybe 5 to 6 hours a day between Grace to You and Ligonier. If there was a track, you know, like who's listened to the most J-Mac sermons,
you know, you hear what he just said? Went to Bible college, left with more questions than answers, and then he confirmed any biases he had by listening to John MacArthur. Welcome back.
Good. Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
You enjoying the live stream so far?
Yeah, it's been quite good. Yeah.
Good. Because there's no refunds, you know that.
Yeah, I'm aware. So, yeah, can I talk to you about one or two quick things?
Sure.
So I don't know how interesting you might find this, but you might find it interesting since you're talking to kind of progressive people, and progressive people often go back to this idea of societal and structural racism. So I don't know, when that happens, do you just sort of say, just accept it, or do you ever feel like sort of questioning it or pushing back or that sort of thing?
On the existence of societal racism?
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking legislatively, I don't think there's any legislative racist laws out there. There might be some old ones that are never ever enforced or even thought of, that they forgot to take off the books, but in our everyday life, I think it's been cleaned up for the most part.
Yeah. So I think that they'll accept, oh yeah, of course there aren't any outright laws like apartheid or anti-race mixing or that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll still usually say, oh, but there's still, you know,
the
these
effects.
other societal effects and
Yeah.
what have, and these kind of semi-invisible effects still hold back, you know, non-white people, especially black people. And those are the reasons why there are differences in outcomes. So and when that kind of reasoning comes up in a debate or a discussion with a progressive,
mm-hmm.
do you sort of feel like just sort of letting that go, or do you feel like kind of
No,
back?
it's easy to push back on that. You say, explain Asians.
Okay, yeah, I like that one. Yeah, and it's, you know, an even better, an even stronger one than that is that there's data from a sort of study called, I think, the ABC study, ABC sample or something like that. I can if you can, I'll give you the exact search terms to find it in a minute. But basically, if you compare the children of Asians where the parents didn't even complete high school, and look at those children's SAT scores on average, like their SAT scores on average are as high or a little higher than than black children whose parents have both completed PhDs. So, that's pretty hard to explain if you think that it's something to do with socioeconomics and that sort of thing.
Wait. So is that study saying that there are intellectual differences based on race?
I mean, I think that seems like what it would suggest.
Yeah, like what is that book about IQ, or that study that was done years ago? And they've done twin studies as well.
The book that made the most kind of brouhaha was called The Bell Curve.
Yeah, that's the book, and that brought a lot of controversy. It's one of those things where if it were true that certain races are intellectually superior than other races, would we as a society want to know it, want to believe it? What's your answer to that?
I think just make it, just be blasé about it, just be casual about it. There are differences in height due to genetics between the races, and if there are differences in mental predispositions, then so be it.
Yeah. Because on an individual level, you would still judge everyone as an individual. But I can imagine how disheartening that would be, or dangerous it could be. It's sort of like if we did with free will, if we don't have free will, let's say we could prove it to the satisfaction of every human, even the Christians. They go, oh, shoot, we don't have free will. The implications of that would be so devastating to the Christian. Like, they'd have to probably become some type of Calvinist Christian at that point. But yeah.
But on the other hand, though, kind of if so in society, there have been a lot of rumblings about free will not existing. Like, people have been saying that for a long time without being hounded out of their jobs and all that sort of thing. And society hasn't broken down, so society can resist people saying, oh, free will doesn't exist. And, it's not as if people have suddenly lost all motivation. So, you can have your cake and eat it too. Like, you can allow people to say the truth and still kind of, in general terms, kind of maintain this kind of something that's possibly fictitious.
Yeah, there's some really uncomfortable questions that I even find a little difficult to ask. But the other day I was in a Discord. Was that a Discord? Yeah. And I asked the question, okay, let's say white people, white European people, were in fact intellectually superior to all other races. So we're in pretend land right now. What would the world look like if that were true? And the thing is, a lot of woke people on the left, since they always talk about systemic racism and white privilege, they would probably say it would look exactly the way we see the world today. Colonization and that sort of thing. And so they're kind of more likely to accept, in a weird way, that white people are indeed superior. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I can sort of see what you're saying.
But I just brought up the chart of like when you asked about how do I push back on systemic racism, the effects of it. Another way I would push back is charts like this and say, okay, how much does this explain what we see? Percentage of births to unwed mothers. Black is the highest in the United States. Then national. Is that the national? No, that's non-white. No, Native American second. Latino third. And then it's the national average, and then is non-Latino white, and then Asian at the bottom. This correlates perfectly to average household income by race. Asians make the most, then whites, then non-white, but not black or Hispanic. Yeah, then Latino.
That definitely looks kind of more palatable to, you know, a progressive type person, because it kind of points to some kind of cultural kind of intervention that seems kind of, you know, less less racially, biologically kind of all that kind of stuff. But they're still kind of sensitive about culture itself, though, because a lot of progressive people kind of consider criticizing black culture to be sacrilege and heretical and that kind of thing.
See, I think this cultural reasons explain the differences we see amongst, in quotes, races. But I'm going to ask you a very uncomfortable question. But do you think certain races are superior to others based on, let's say, things like intellect, ingenuity, innovation, that sort of thing?
That's the most likely kind of thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Best supported by the evidence.
So if people hear you say that and call you a racist, what do you say? Yeah, I am?
No, I'd point out that I don't have any hatred or animosity or hostility based on race, but you can't say, like, if I believe that there's genetic reasons for different races to have different heights, there shouldn't be that much difference between acknowledging that acknowledging that there's evidence for that versus acknowledging evidence for other types of differences being genetically influenced.
What country are you in?
I'm in the UK.
In the UK. So when you're walking down the street in the UK and you see a black person, are you more likely to have a thought in your head that says in some way this person's might be, well, I don't even know, you might be African American. I mean, black. Did I say African American?
Yeah, you said it.
Are you white? What are you? Put yourself in a box, please. What are you?
I'm British.
Well, you can be British black, can't you?
Yeah, but I want to be vague.
Okay.
But I'll answer the question you were originally going to ask, which is yes, yeah. Like obviously there are differences in average crime rate and especially average kind of street crime rate, and so it would be rational to take that into account.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, you can't like punish people and tell them that they're evil for being rational. That's just I oppose.
But would you
like that? Would
you be more likely to help someone who you deem as racially inferior to you?
Well, I mean, racial. I never used the term.
I know.
Inferior.
I don't know how else to say it. Racially not as advantaged.
You mean like lower IQ on average?
Yeah. Okay. We'll stick to IQ.
Yeah. If obviously that wouldn't make a difference. Like if someone is kind of low IQ on average of any group, they sort of warrant the same kind of help on that basis. Like you don't apportion out kind of human rights according to IQ.
Because I've made this point many times and people have a knee-jerk reaction against it. I have said that I've asked the question, why is racism bad? And if we define racism as having to do, let's say, with difference in intellect amongst the races, and they go crazy. You go, how dare you even ask that question? All racism is bad. But it sounds like you're saying that the evidence points to there are racial differences in things like IQ, and that doesn't necessarily mean that type of prejudice based or discrimination based on race is bad. It depends on how you act upon it, if at all. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's a big range of what you have in mind when you say it depends. Like, so I agree, it would depend.
Yeah, because I've given the example of, okay, imagine someone who truly believes that white people are superior to black people, not only in intellect, but in moral things, whatever, virtues. But they use that racism that they have to help those who are less fortunate than they are. Would you be against that type of racism? They're truly helping, like providing jobs, providing food, providing education, whatever you want to say. And it's fun to ask that type of question to people because it's almost like their brain short circuits.
Yeah, you're pitting. They should have most of these types of people. Their publicly stated highest goal is some kind of utilitarianism or maximizing the goods, reducing the harm. And so you're weighing that against kind of their drive to attack anything they detect as racist. So yeah, I like that kind of question. And I have a similar one. Like I sometimes, or I haven't asked it that many times, but basically, you'd ask whether it's whether if there's someone who's racist, like he prefers his own group of people, but because he prefers and loves his own group of people, he does a lot of charity for them, and he kind of helps all his kind of local kind of in this case, let's say white people, and he kind of does lots of charitable works for them. Is that a better person than someone who is just kind of apathetic and doesn't help anyone of any race?
Yeah.
And you could sort of tweak it in order to kind of like make it more, point it, like stab the wound in a bit more. You could tweak it to make it more or less difficult for them to answer, but something along those lines.
Thanks for the donation, Crossover Maniac. Strange coincidence that big brain races just happen to put a strong emphasis on education and delayed gratification, almost as if IQ is more affected by home environment and culture than by race. Yeah, and the question is, in order to believe that racism exists, you have to believe race exists. And how much that we attribute to race is actually just culture. Like, is race basically on the skin shade of your skin, or how big your eyes are, or what's your, like? Are you a race realist? That race is a real thing?
Well, like I think the most clear way to answer that, I mean, people have different ideas of what race realism means. So rather than getting into the weeds on that, I think I can clearly answer your question by pointing out that human beings evolved in different environments, and so different groups of human beings have some genetic differences, and if you acknowledge those types of things, then you would acknowledge that there are kind of on average some genetic differences between the kind of self-identified races and ethnicities, which may be kind of cultural constructions or that sort of thing.
Yeah. There's definitely a distribution because of all the interbreeding. Like me, my wife has Trinidadian descent, heritage, and mine's Dutch, German, maybe even a little bit of Russian. So, what are my kids based on race? Like in America, if you have a certain skin shade or greater or darker, you're automatically black. You don't talk about, like, Obama was not half white. He was black. So
yeah.
Interesting. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about besides the most controversial topic ever conceived by man?
Yeah. No. That I guess that's it. Can I just give I'll just mention the source that I referred to earlier, which was in order to sort of see that kind of the children of Asian parents who didn't even complete high school have higher SAT scores than the children of black parents who have PhDs. What you do is sort of go on Google and search Cremieux, spelled CREMIEUX, Cremieux, and then search something like Asian high school black PhD SAT, and I'm pretty sure it will come up if you search that. It's the first sort of Twitter results, and
Okay.
that Twitter account will link to the actual study.
Okay, I wrote that down.
Yeah.
I'll definitely. I'm interested in this type of thing, and I'm curious because I've read some of the twin studies, and yeah, it's pretty interesting and pretty scary.
Yeah. Oh, one more then, if you're quite interested, is that there's also a study that's looked at sort of national longitudinal survey of youth, which kind of looked at a whole cohort of young people kind of born in 1985 and kind of looking at their childhood circumstances, then looking at how they turned out as adults. And they kind of looked at a sort of poor, like bottom 20% in terms of household income, black kids versus white kids. And they found that among the black kids who are in this bottom quintile of household income as children, they're just as likely to raise their socioeconomic status as poor white kids, provided they have the same IQ. There's no higher likelihood of equally intelligent poor white kids to kind of raise their socioeconomic status. So, and that would be the exact opposite of what you'd expect to observe if there was some societal kind of massive effect giving an unfair advantage to white people just for being white. Like if that were the case, then these equally intelligent poor white kids should be much more likely to raise their socioeconomic status. But if the two kids who are from these poor households have the same IQ, they're both just as likely to raise their socioeconomic status by the time they're adults. And if you search Pew Research intergenerational economic mobility in the United States, that it should be one of the first results for that, and then go to figure 13.
Boy, you got this memorized.
Yeah, I've
See, I got a friend named Danny. He has a YouTube channel called Phil Talk, and we were talking about this, I don't know, a year ago, and he even pushes back that IQ is a real thing.
What does he mean by real?
That it's all based on education, the culture you're raised in, and that people can have be really smart in one area, but not so smart in other areas. But you look at Down syndrome kids, they have an IQ of 65, whatever. You can't deny that there are people born with slow mental capacity. Just the capability to memorize, to remember, is a big thing in IQ. And then, of course, you got creativity and spatial. You can see things that are not there. Just the willingness to entertain hypotheticals, to me, is a good indicator of IQ. So,
does he acknowledge that?
I don't know. Maybe the algorithm will point to this video for him, and he can hear us talk, and he can come on at some point and talk about it. But I think it's hard for him not to acknowledge it.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's just motivated reasoning, isn't it? It's like that guy's some sort of Marxist, isn't he? Like, all his friends are Marxists, so he's probably a Marxist. And Marxists hate kind of acknowledging, natural differences or hard to change differences between groups of people. So, I lose patience very quickly with people like that. Kind of that's why I don't sort of throw my hat into debate that often. I just kind of lose patience. But anyway,
what's interesting is the distribution curve of IQs by not race but by sex is interesting as well. That women tend to have a narrower distribution, and men tend to have a broad one. And so there are more smart men than women and more dumb men than women. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's a couple of other differences, like kind of women having worse shape rotation abilities on average. And if you try and make them visualize kind of what a shape looks like if you rotate it in 3D space, they're a little bit worse on average at that than men. and shape rotation kind of is quite predictive of sort of interest and ability in things like engineering and other sort of technical mathematical style subjects.
I was asked the other day if I believe there should be men's and women's chess leagues. And I said no, but I wasn't very confident in it. But like the IQ distribution could explain the differences in why there's so many men in chess versus women. Do you agree with that? And that they excel at it compared to women.
Yeah. Like if there's going to be more geniuses among men and more idiots among men, then you'd expect men to sort of be more represented among the top of most sort of intellectual pursuits. But why wouldn't you want sort of women's chess leagues?
Well, to me, because I think I answered no, because it's an admission from women that they're not good enough to compete against the men. Right?
Yeah, but you know, they admit that about physical sports as well.
Well, that's a good point. But people tend to differentiate between physical strength and mental strength, and it's just a tougher pill to swallow, I guess.
Yeah, I think like the ultimate sort of instinctive moral reason why we as a society want women's sports and like women only leagues and different things is because, you know, we see some sort of aesthetic value in watching women compete. And if it was only open and if it was only kind of no sex barred groups, then you'd only ever see men compete. And so people kind of consider that worthwhile just aesthetically. And so the same way I enjoy aesthetically watching women, I know, play tennis or something, I might enjoy watching women play chess aesthetically. So,
and when you say aesthetically, you mean cleavage?
No, I just mean in general beauty. But you can take it however you want. But,
All right. Okay. Well, thanks for calling in. That was an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
I wonder how many conversations like that are on YouTube. Not too many. Anyhow, I'll wrap it up if nobody else wants to call in. But if you do want to call in now. Do not tarry. Do not tarry. Jesus' return is nigh. What do we got here? Oh, sample pack. I missed you.
You always miss me.
It's been a long, long time.
Oh, I gotta turn you off in the background. My bad.
It's all right.
Okay. So, do you believe that there are racist people?
Yes.
Now you're a betting man. What are the odds that your previous caller is racist?
Well, he basically admitted he's racist.
Okay.
Based on IQ.
Do you think he's racist based on other things as well?
I have no idea.
Well, so what do you mean he's racist based on IQ?
Well, if you define racism as differences in races on things like IQ, if that's your definition, in other words, some races are smarter than other races. If that's your definition of racism, then yeah, it sounds like he was a race realist, and also, well, with caveats, and also that he believes that there are definitely differences in the races of IQ. So that would make him a racist. Then they got asked another question: is that bad?
So what would that justify him behave? Like what behaviors of his could that kind of racism justify for him?
Well, that's what. Yeah, we were. I didn't ask him that question directly, like his own personal life, but
Yeah. Like if you just believe that people have different IQs, does that justify any particular behavior?
I don't think so, because you would still have to look at each person individually, right?
Right.
So it's basically just an explanation for, let's say, why was it that the British, or was it the Chinese, made the gun first and therefore could colonize different people first,
Okay.
right? That explanation is an explanation for that question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why was it that the Europeans could take over North America and not the Native Americans take over Europe?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that? So you're saying that you don't think that if he was just racist in the idea that he thinks some races have different IQs, then there's really no behavior that justifies like prejudice or lack of prejudice.
I don't think so, but you would have to ask him. But I from my understanding of him, he's actually wanting to call in. I can open up the room. You want to talk to him?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to lose you for like 2 seconds, then you'll come back.
Okay.
Hang on, the other guy. This will be fun. Let in. Okay, so why don't you ask him? Can you hear us? Abortion is bad?
Yes.
Okay, so Sample Pack is a nice guy, but he has a question for you.
Yeah. So if okay, so I guess would you agree with PineCreek's characterization that you're racist?
Depends what you mean by that. Like if that means that there are differences between different races, then trivially, yes. But
Okay.
I don't have any animosity or like hostility, like just because there are differences between different races. So I'd say on that more important aspect, I'd say no.
So what? So is IQ the only difference that you believe is between the races?
No, there's like obviously differences in physical things like hair or skin or propensity to diseases and there's other things that
Okay. Is there a
various things
propensity
like that.
towards anything else?
Sorry?
So propensity towards diseases. What about behavior?
In terms of other behavioral things.
Okay.
Well, like there's differences in like how quickly babies of different races mature. I think, like I remember hearing about that black babies are able to kind of support their own weight at a earlier age than like white babies, and so that
Like
might give an indication
standing
of
and crawling, you mean?
yeah, or like being able to support the weight of their head and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Or even like hold onto a bar with their fingers.
What about morally? I think that's what Sample Pack is getting at, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know of any firm evidence one way or another that things like violence or that sort of thing. I don't know about any firm evidence one way or the other. But
What about weak evidence? Are you aware of weak evidence?
I don't know. Like
you haven't read anything on it?
Yeah. Here's an example of something that might be considered weak evidence.
Okay.
Like before the current sort of way of investigating genetic influences on behavior, where you do kind of genome-wide association studies, and you're able to sort of like test whether a lot of different genetic variants in each contribute a little effect size to a certain kind of behavior or outcome or that sort of thing. Like you might have you might be able to see what risk someone is at of developing schizophrenia. Or actually, that's a more firm example. Like schizophrenia, I think there's some evidence to believe would vary between different races.
Well, that's a disease again. Unless you're saying that schizophrenia like is behavioral as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's like schizophrenics are more likely to commit violence because of their delusions. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean it's not their fault, but like it's still kind of an outcome that's might be of interest.
What about like propensity towards other kinds of violence or to crime or something like that?
Right. So yeah, let me get back to what I was saying before. Like there was some weak evidence that a certain gene variant for monoamine oxidase, I think, like MAO-A, people thought that this one type of gene which affected a sort of serotonin reuptake inhibitor, I think. I'm kind of half remembering stuff from things I read a few years ago, but I seem to remember that this gene, they had some evidence they were linking it towards violent behavior. And then when you looked at how this different gene was distributed between different ethnic groups, there were differences in how it was distributed. But that would be considered, very, very weak evidence.
And oftentimes, what I've heard from, I have no idea if this is true, but some African Americans say that white people are genetically or inherently more violent than black people.
Yeah, sometimes they say that.
Now, I don't know what they base that on, Django Unchained, the movie, but...
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean... So what do you think of that? Like, do you think that would count as weak evidence for there being differences in, violent behavior, having some genetic basis between races?
I don't know anything about it. I haven't read anything on it.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, I understand. But if hypothetically what I said was true, then would you count that as weak evidence for, what we're talking about?
If you're saying that there's like a gene that would predispose someone towards violence, then I would agree that there is a gene that predisposes someone towards violence. Yeah, that's like a tautological, right?
Well, it's very reasonable. Like, it's definitely, there's a gene, or a hormone at least, a gene that causes a hormone production of testosterone that causes violence, and it's more in men. So the question is, does that also apply to certain races?
Right. But like,
I think
at the same time, there could be...
testosterone.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Well, I was saying, like, you can't just take one thing out of context because there could be other things that reduce violence as well. Like, you have to compare, like, you'd have to, like, do a net summation, right? Somehow.
Yeah, I agree. But, like, I mean...
But if someone did have these genes or believed that, like, a race was more predisposed towards violence, would that justify any prejudice against that group?
Maybe. Like, it depends how great the difference is. Like, like I think it's justified to be more worried if you're walking past a dangerous looking dog like a pit bull than if you walk past a Labrador. So, but like, probably we aren't dealing with effect sizes that big. And so
you don't want to walk by my dog.
Yeah. But like, I think people are justified, if they're walking down the street at night, kind of feeling more worried if they see a man walking towards them than a woman, because they'd think, well, men on average commit more violence than women, and I think that this, and even if you don't think that this is biologically determined, even if you think that men and women are sort of blank slates, and it's just kind of a historical accident that men have ended up more violent throughout history, you'd still be justified, I think, in sort of being more worried about the man approaching you alone at night than the woman approaching you alone at night. Kind of,
yeah.
That's just making a decision under uncertainty. It's using kind of Bayesian decision theory. It's being rational. If
humans are anything like dogs, I mean, we ought to be worried. or these are very uncomfortable topics we're talking about right now, because you can tell huge differences between breeds of dog.
I don't think this would have been an uncomfortable topic to people living, before the last 200 years. Like if you talk to like ancient Greek people, like or sort of, I think, yeah, almost any time in history before the last 200 years, people would have thought, sort of agreed in principle with what I'm saying, even if they think, well, I haven't seen this evidence yet. They'd still agree, well, if in principle this evidence was shown to me, then, you know, it would make sense for me to act accordingly.
I want to ask Sample Pack something, though, because I've, in the past, have asked this question many times. Why is racism bad? And, and people get mad at me for even asking the question. But given that, based on the definition of racism, what's your first name? Can I ask? Not Sample Pack, the other guy. I don't even know your first name. Do you want to give your first name?
No, my name is AB.
Okay,
Sorry,
AB. I'll just
AB.
I'll call you AB. So given AB's definition of racism, and given that he said he's a racist based on that definition, Sample Pack, would you say you have enough information at this point to say that
Can you repeat the definition of racism again?
Difference in races based on IQ? I think we mostly talked about IQ, but then you brought up other things. But let's just leave it at intellect, let's say. Based on that definition of racism, and based that AB said he's a racist based on that definition, would you say that that type of racism is bad?
I don't think that. Well, I don't agree necessarily that that's like the colloquial definition of racism. Like that's more of like a race realist, I would say, right?
Yeah, but based on his definition or our definition that we were talking about here, would you say that's bad?
No, I don't think it's bad to believe that there are differences in IQ.
Okay, based on race.
Yeah.
Okay. See, my biggest thing in asking the question, why is racism bad, is to get to the real root of how does it affect your behavior. And you ask great questions to AB about that. What does that mean in everyday practical life with this type of racism? And if it ends up causing people to have a better life because you're benevolent because of your beliefs, or you give to charity because of your beliefs.
I'd be curious if AB does.
You'd be curious if it does?
If AB gives more to charity because of these beliefs.
No, but I have another reason. I'm not racially apathetic, right? I'm not
You're just racially pathetic?
Wait, what?
You said you're just racially pathetic, not apathetic.
Zing. But
Yeah.
but like, you know, I think, you know, the same way that I automatically have a preference for my relatives, and I've kind of evolved that way. Like I've evolved to when I kind of meet a relative, I kind of feel more warmth to them. I feel kind of more trust, that sort of thing. The same also goes for people who are kind of extended family, like my ethnic group. I kind of feel more warmth in the company of members of my own ethnic group. I feel kind of more trust. I feel more comfortable. And this is quite normal throughout the world. Like if you kind of ask people this on surveys, it's a kind of well-known phenomenon called in-group preference. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, like to, you know, love your family more than strangers, and to feel more warmth and comfort towards people who are kind of more closely related to you, who kind of share more close ancestry with you.
Yeah, I'd kill
And
Sample
so-
Pack way before my own kids. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and in fact, kind of races other than Caucasian people experience this kind of to a greater degree. Like there's a survey kind of done as part of the exit polls of like the 2016 US election, where they kind of asked people of different races, kind of, do you feel more warmth or less warmth to X race? And like white people, and they broke it down by how they voted, like Democrat voters or Republican voters, kind of, do you feel more warmth towards your race or less warmth towards your race? So it's broken down by kind of political ideology and race. And so white kind of Democrat voters were the only group who actually felt less warmth towards members of their own race if they kind of asked, you know, rate numerically, like 1 to 5, how much warmth you feel towards the following racial groups. Like the white kind of liberal Democrat voters said that they feel less warmth towards white people.
That's
Whereas
because
every
of
other
white guilt. That's because of the whole woke thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas every other race, whether they were kind of liberal or Democrat, conservative or Republican, kind of, they said that when they were asked, kind of, do you feel, how much warmth do you feel towards the following races? Kind of every other race said that they felt more warmth towards their own race, and to a greater degree than even white conservatives. They kind of, like, if you ask a black kind of progressive, blacker sort of Democrat voter, how much warmth do you feel towards your members of your own race? He kind of like would rate that higher than a sort of white conservative.
But not black conservatives. Black conservatives would say, I feel very uncomfortable with my own race. No, that's true.
No, I know. You're just, the way you
I know you're saying that's based on kind of notable exceptions, like in the media, but on average, that I don't believe that is true. I would probably, getting back to the original question, kind of, if hypothetically I was given a choice between donating kind of X% of my income to people in Africa versus X% of my income to people in my own country,
What about people in your own country that are not of the same race?
Yeah, it's same answer. Like, I'd prefer it to go towards people who are of my same race. I'd have a slight preference because, I just feel more warmth, more comfort, etc. And that doesn't mean
why not help those that you think are lesser?
Huh?
Why not help those that you think are lesser?
They gotta help themselves, Sample Pack.
Well, he wants to help people that he thinks are better. He thinks that he wants to help the people that are in the better position.
It doesn't have anything to do with lesser or better. It's just, I want to help.
Well, someone with less IQ is clearly lesser in your eyes, right?
Well, no, that's like saying someone with less height is lesser. I mean, it's, like that's just being an IQ determinist. Even like, for example, here's something that
you're saying that you think someone who has 80 IQ is not a lesser in some way than someone who has 100 IQ?
Well,
in some way, yeah.
They're lesser in
so
some way.
Do you think that someone who has 80 IQ needs some more help than someone who has 100 IQ?
Well, they would need more help in order to achieve the same results. But that doesn't factor into my decision-making process.
What if we don't want equality of outcome? We just want to help them.
Let me help AB. Let me help you answer this. I think, Sample Pack, if the range of IQ is that extreme, 20 IQ points is actually quite extreme. Like, I think you're almost considered Down syndrome at 80, maybe 75. Yeah. And so I would say, you ought to help as a society and individually.
How many IQ points do we think is the difference? Abortion is bad.
Like, on between like kind of Caucasian people, so like Ashkenazi Jews on average have an IQ of like between 108 to 112.
And this is based on the bell curve.
Well, no, but there's like several different sort of studies.
Like, Jews are the smartest.
Yeah, Ashkenazi Jews in particular, but like then Northeast Asians on average have IQs of like 105.
You don't need to list them all. Just go from the highest to the lowest. Tell me the range.
I can bring it up too.
But
so just tell me the highest and the lowest. 112 and what's the lowest?
Yeah, so the highest is 112 Ashkenazi Jews, and kind of the lowest that I know of being in a sort of kind of similar society, that type of thing, would be sort of Africans, maybe Australian Aboriginals, but I don't know about that. But like, kind of, I think there's good evidence that Africans or people of sub-Saharan African ancestry, on average, have IQs of 85.
Okay, so that's pretty close to my number of 80, right, PineCreek?
Can I answer the earlier question you asked, which was kind of, surely we should want to help kind of the people who are, in your words, lesser. But my answer is no, because like I want to like help my family members. I want to help those who are kind of close to me. And so whether or not whatever IQ my family members are, I still want to help them more than people who aren't my family.
When you donate to charity, are you donating to your family members?
Well, I mean, it's in a sense, like kind of you know, when you help your family members, you are kind of doing charitable acts to them. Your help, like charity, kind of could be considered as just helping people, and so but like on average, normally people use the word charity to refer to kind of giving to people who aren't your immediate family. So, but like,
what about if we're in the government and we're allocating resources towards our population, right? Should you allocate resources across the board equally, or should you help those that most need help?
I think for governments, you need to kind of balance out the risk of, you know, sort of violent civil war and that sort of thing.
Like, let's say I'm trying to issue tax breaks, okay? I want to give tax breaks to people. Should I give the same proportion of tax break to a wealthy person as to a non-wealthy person?
Well, now this is off race. You got to make it a black person versus a white person or something like that.
Well, I'm trying to get the a norm here first.
Yeah. I'm telling you, like, other things being equal, I think the norm is that other things being equal, I think it's good for people to help those who are more closely biologically related to them. You know, I think people loving their family members.
Yeah, but what about for the government, right? The government isn't related to.
Well, no, I mean, the government is, because typically governments are formed out of people who are of kind of closer ancestry. That's the kind of.
If the government is mostly white, it should help mostly white people.
So like basically, how nations typically form is that you know, humans spread out.
I don't need to know how nations form. I just want to know about a government right now.
Well, no, I do need to explain this, because like what you're
do.
saying.
I think you're rambling.
Well, if you don't want to hear my explanations, then that's fine. Like, kind of.
But is very basic.
Okay, so basically.
So the question is, should a predominantly white government help white people more than other people? That's your question, Sample Pack? I say no to that.
Well, so we need to realize that the way states form is that, you know, humans spread out of Africa and they start kind of creating tribes, and those tribes start kind of merging as a result of conquest or mutual defense against some enemy.
We know how history works.
Out of this organic process, you get kind of nations that generally they share more kind of ancestry towards people within their nation than towards kind of far-flung.
Right. So, AB, are you saying that it's basically the natural proclivity is to do that, but is that an ought a predominantly white government give more to white citizens versus, let's say, Asian or black citizens? Should they do that?
Yeah. So yes, in the same way that given that it is a natural proclivity to love your family members more than strangers, I believe humans ought to do that. Like, I think it's beautiful when humans do that. I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful when
what about a government that's mostly wealthy individuals? Ought they give to mostly wealthy citizens?
No, because kind of wealth isn't in your blood. Like, wealth isn't your.
But your skin color is in your blood, and therefore everyone of the same skin color is your relative in some
no skin color. When we're talking about race, we aren't really talking about skin color. Skin color is just a proxy. Yeah, exactly. It's a proxy for ancestry. So really, we're talking about ancestry. And so yes, I think people should help. I think people should help people with closer ancestry more than people with more distant ancestry. Other things being equal.
See, AB, I think you're giving bad answers here. Like, I think you could just say you should help people who need the help the most. And if that happens to be black people, then they get the most help. Isn't that a reasonable answer?
No, I don't believe so. Because, like, listen, if I was like a father and I saw someone who really needed help, but he was a stranger, I still have more of an obligation towards my own children. Like, I need to make sure my own children are well looked after.
No, I get that. I get that. I would be the same way. Like I said, I would help my children before I would help you two. Like, you guys are basically strangers to me. But when we're talking about the government, where most citizens are strangers to the federal government, why show preference based on wealth or race?
So,
you should, or you should show preference based on need, right?
Well, America is like a strange example because America, you know, it's not formed of a kind of legitimate sort of organic process. Like really, what America should, America should be sort of a nation ruled by the native indigenous Americans. And what those native indigenous Americans,
you mean the Native Americans?
The Native Americans, they should govern the country in a way that primarily benefits Native Americans. And you know that's what.
Where do you get this idea of should?
Well,
are you an atheist, AB?
No, I'm not an atheist. No.
Oh, okay. So are you saying these oughts come from God?
Yes.
Whoa. See, Sample Pack and I are atheists, so this is maybe where there's a difference. So do you think God actually has ordained preferential treatment based on race?
I thought God ordained Trump.
Based on ancestry, and you can see this. You can see this in sort of the Gospel of Matthew when the Gentile woman comes to Jesus and he says that he came in order to. Yeah. He's no. What he said was that like kind of basically the master, like the head of the household, the father, should feed his children first, and then give scraps to the dog.
Okay, but
because and this illustrates the principle, the moral principle perfectly. Like you should make sure that your own people are well looked after, and then whatever's left over, then you give it to help the rest of the world.
See, okay, Sample Pack, I can translate what I think he's saying here. Please. That I think he has a hierarchy of helps similar to what I have. Family first helps the needy, then extended family, then neighborhood, smaller communities, then state, and then federal. Federal is the last bastion of help. And so that's the conservative way of looking at things. And but he's incorporating that kind of hierarchy that also applies to the federal, because if it's 95% white people in government, then the white people are the family through heritage.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't agree with it. I think as a conservative, I would say that government should stay out of people's lives as much as possible. But if it's down to, okay, we're going to allocate X amount of dollars for welfare, who should get that welfare? I don't think color, skin color, or race should be a determining factor. Do you disagree with that, AB?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I think kind of a nation should try and help its people, and so kind of when it comes to like organic nations, like
but based on color, skin color,
based on ancestry.
Okay, so I would say the United States is still majority European white. If there's literally people starving in the United States, like if they didn't have food stamps, they would go hungry. Are you saying those food stamps shouldn't be given to, let's say, African Americans based on ancestry?
I think kind of like a white. So each group of people should try and make sure that their own are looked after first, and then help look after other people. And so, at what point do you say, well, my group of people are now doing well enough that I can start helping other people?
Because stop drawing lines based on race. They're not like all of us are our group of people. We're all Americans.
Yeah, like what group of people would my kids belong in?
So, like, obviously, kind of they belong to both groups. So, like both like so for example,
lucky. Everyone's gonna help them.
If PineCreek's children, listen, if PineCreek's children, if I was like, representing how I think groups of people should behave, I think that like white people should look at PineCreek's children and say, these people have, very close ancestry to us because, one of our members has just, produced them. and so we should help them. They're a member of our extended family.
You don't think like one drop is
the white people should do the same.
You don't think one drop makes them black?
No, it's like what's the word? About how much admixture you have.
Oh,
Okay, when you first came in, AB, I thought you were a good racist, but now I'm starting to think you're a bad racist.
Listen. I'm not advocating for animosity. I'm not advocating for animosity, right?
Right. But you're basically saying each race to their own.
Well, I mean, it's just natural for people to kind of have more kind of warmth and trust.
But it's also natural for me to have sex with many women as I can, but I choose to be faithful to my wife. Like, we don't always just do what's natural, right? We ought not to do what's natural.
I know. I think there are some things that are kind of natural and good, and I think loving your family
is non-natural for having a black wife.
Sorry?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Do you think what I did was wrong, AB, to marry a black woman?
No, but like, I mean, on average, there'll be
Well, not wrong. Average, is it unnatural?
Is it unnatural? No, you wouldn't say it's unnatural either. But like, on
so
average,
you have no problems at all with me marrying a black woman?
Well, what I'd say is that like, if you kind of added up the pros and cons, like on average, it would be a more risky proposition, because like on average, kind of black people and white people, they're more likely to have less matching culture than sort of two.
Okay, my wife and I had almost the exact same culture. She came from a very conservative evangelical Protestant background, and so did I. In fact,
great.
Yeah, I was raised Mennonite, and she was raised almost like Mennonite. Her mom wore head coverings and the whole bit. So based on that background knowledge, do you have any problems with me, the pasty white guy, marrying a very dark-skinned woman?
No, like obviously that eliminates that potential worry.
Okay.
But there are some other potential worries. Like one other big potential worry is that if two groups of people, have a pre-existing kind of history of animosity, then it's more likely to kind of bring tension.
Practical reasons. Like we might get laughed at or abused or whatever. I understand that, but so far in Arizona, no big deal.
But so let's imagine that kind of theoretically you might have some relatives who have some hostility towards black people, and there might be some black people in your wife's side of the family who might have some hostility towards white people.
Yeah, I had to eat in the kitchen in one family gathering. They wouldn't let me into the dining room.
Okay, but you can imagine that there could be kind of more serious examples, and so it's going to be a trickier sort of course to navigate for like a harmonious
I understand.
life.
I understand.
Okay.
If you were up in heaven with God,
yeah,
and you asked him, "Are you okay with what Doug did? Getting married to what would God say?"
What would God say? And I think
you paused. You paused.
Yeah, because it's a tricky question. Like God would have all knowledge of everything, and so.
I know. I mean, just based on race. If you were up in heaven with God and that's, hey, is what Doug did, marrying a black woman, good or bad in your opinion, Yahweh? Or not in your opinion, based on your nature, what would Yahweh say?
Like, I don't know, because it's subject to a lot of different factors that.
See, most Christians would answer. I don't know if you're a Christian or not, but most Abrahamic.
I am.
Okay, most Christians would answer, yeah, God would have no problem with it.
Well,
maybe not most, but a lot.
So the reason why I hesitate about that is because, I think God's sort of made us into different groups for some kind of purpose. And I think, God's told us in this story of the Gentile woman coming to Jesus, like Jesus very clearly kind of gave this moral principle that it's good for people to kind of look after their own people first and then start looking after other people. And so, I don't know, I think sort of given that there is like some kind of tension pre-existing between kind of sort of black people in America.
Okay, so if the whole world were to interbreed with other races freely out of their own free will, it just, let's say starting tomorrow, all coitus that leads to reproduction will be black to white, Asian to black, whatever. You think that would be a bad thing?
Well, it depends how it pans out. But if it resulted in like total harmony, then it would be a wonderful thing.
Okay. You sound like a consequentialist.
I mean, I'm not like purely consequentialist. I don't know.
Like racism would basically go away, right? Because everybody would be a whole bunch of races and mixed and.
Well, I mean, it'd probably go away for a while, but like it might sort of reappear again if people kind of form sort of different breeding patterns and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I know.
But, I mean,
if you look on the top left of this room, we're running out of time.
I want to ask, I want you've been asking me questions. I want to ask both of you questions.
Sure. It's
so interesting.
Like, why is it bad for people to have more kind of warmth and love and that sort of thing towards those who have closer ancestry to them?
Because the odds are that someone of a different race in the same city as you has more in common than someone who's the same race, but like halfway across the world, right?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about like what it's like to be in Russia, but like, you know, being in like the city, like you like have more in common with like a black guy from the same city than some random Russian.
Like I live in a gated community, and if everybody in this gated community was black except for me, I would feel way more comfortable living here in a black community than living in a hillbilly community that's a bunch of white people.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that directly answers my question. Like, are you saying...
He's saying it's not about race, it's about culture, is what he's saying.
Okay. But I don't know, like if you met like a relative, like a long lost relative who had been raised in a different culture, like let's say kind of your family got separated due to
a difference.
A refugee crisis, and one of your cousins got raised by a different country while you moved to America, and then you met your kind of long lost cousin. Are you saying like you'd kind of consider him a stranger because he
I have 50 first cousins, and well, some of them died now, and I don't like a lot of them.
I think that's a pity. I think that's a shame. That's
not a shame. It's just it's a fact of reality, right? Like you don't know anything about these people.
And I would say a lot of them don't like me because I'm an atheist, and most of them are Christian.
Well, I think for most people's reality, like just like meeting someone that they knew they shared blood with, they'd kind of automatically feel some warmth towards that person.
I totally agree with you when it comes to your own family, and I think we evolve that way. But when you make those circles broader, even to first cousins, I think it falls apart pretty quickly.
Well, it dilutes, but the effects, even if the effect size kind of gets smaller, kind of gradually, kind of, I think it would still be there like a little bit.
Yeah, it would be. But once you get to the federal level and you're making policies like on welfare, food stamps and stuff, to say, well, we're going to give preferential treatment to the white people for food stamps before the black people, I think that's bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's what they do in like places like sort of Dubai. Like the only people with political.
Do you want to live in Dubai?
Well, like Dubai is not a bad country by any stretch of the imagination. Like it's
well, they definitely do that in China. I mean, China is one of the most racist nations in the world. Same with Japan. Like if you have Japanese blood, Chinese blood, even the laws are different. I mean, you can be a permanent resident of Japan and still if you're half Japanese in Japan, they look at you differently.
Yeah.
And that's bad in my opinion. America is much better.
I mean, it depends how you sort of pan it out, basically. Like there's good sort of what's the word? Applications. No, implementations. There's good implementations and like bad implementations. Like, but you know, if lots of people when they go traveling, they'll be traveling in a foreign country, but then as soon as they see someone kind of not even from the same country as them, but from the same sort of part of the world as them, they'll immediately feel some sort of kinship because they'll think, oh,
well, I think that's mostly due to culture. Like if I was traveling in China and I see another pasty white guy like me, I'm going to assume he can speak English, maybe he's American or Canadian, and share some of the same values and so forth. But if they turned out to be just a pasty white guy who's was third generation Chinese, that kinship would just dissolve. I mean, because the culture's so different. But anyhow, we're running out of time. If you look on the top left, there's a little timer, and
I don't see the timer, but I believe you. Do you want me to head out and then you can keep your time, or I don't know how that works?
No, I'm going to shut down the stream because
Okay.
it's I got things to do later today.
Good chat with you.
But AB, even though I called you a bad racist, I really appreciate you coming on and talk about these things.
Do you think he's still a bad racist, or do you think he has absolved himself?
No, well, let me put it this way, AB. I very strongly disagree with some of your opinions. I very strongly disagree. That when after the point where Sample Pack came on, but the stuff that we're talking about, the IQ differences based on race, that is a very interesting conversation, and it's one of those ones where if the evidence pointed to that, I'd believe it. I think actually the evidence does slightly point to that, but then again, you got to look at the testing itself and so forth. I think the twin study is really problematic, or it's problematic to believe. And the other study that you mentioned, I'll look up. And if there are differences based on race on an individual level, it probably doesn't make a difference. On a society level, it probably does. And that might explain some things we see in the world today. But then that ought to lead us to behave more compassionately towards people and not worse. And I think you agree with that, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
And when it boils down to it, based on IQ, Asians are the smartest, not white people.
No, it's Ashkenazi Jews.
Oh, sorry. Well,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Ashkenazi Jews, then Asians, Chinese.
Yeah.
More specifically.
So,
yeah.
Did you get a sense, like, I guess it was my initial question coming in. If you were a betting man, would you have bet at the beginning of this conversation that
it would have gone this way?
Yeah.
Maybe, because AB and I have talked together, but we talked about abortion, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that kind of dawned on me when you came in, and so I wasn't quite sure if AB was even an atheist or a Christian, and so then everything started to fit together. And I think a lot of your views, AB, come from the Tower of Babel, actually. I mean, right?
No. I'm more guided by that sort of gospel story.
But do you believe in evolution via common descent?
Hey, PineCreek, I gotta run.
To a degree.
Okay.
But
microevolution.
Sample Pack's question, by the way, of like being a betting man and that sort of thing. Like, yeah, it makes total sense, because obviously in this current climate where kind of you're harshly punished for talking about these types of things and sort of having the differing view, only people who have kind of strong sort of kind of moral beliefs they're going to be disproportionately likely to withstand that kind of negative consequence. And so there's a small number of people who are like true neutral liberals who just want to seek the truth, but they're totally racially apathetic and colorblind. But most people who are like that, who are kind of racially apathetic and colorblind and just enjoy seeking the truth, it wouldn't be worth the trouble for them to kind of investigate this, because they know what kind of consequence is likely to happen. And so yeah, obviously there's a selection pressure for people who sort of, think, oh, actually, in-group preference is quite a good thing as well. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm any worse than, like, I think most people have, like, in-group preference. And all I'm saying is that, like, that's natural, normal, healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's the same ultimate instinct as when you kind of love your family members more than strangers. There are lots of kind of individualist, utilitarians who are kind of globally, universally utilitarian, who think that any kind of preference towards your family members is wrong. And I
agree with you there. I think you're right, and it's pretty obvious about these proclivities and preferences for your close kinship. I just disagree that on a federal level, policy-wise, it should be that way. But anyhow, thanks for calling in. What'd you guys think of that conversation? But IQ isn't everything, says Casey Wellwood. Well, it's not everything, but it's a big thing. It's horrific ideology, the kind of tribalism breeds discrimination and violence. Well, it definitely can. But then again, it could breed compassion and benevolence. It's one of those things that what I like about this conversation is the cognitive dissonance that it can create. Like, let's say I was to become a woke progressive because I'm a racist. Let's say I said, yes, African Americans are far inferior in intellect compared to Asians and white people, and we need to help them and do everything in our power to build them up because they're an oppressed minority, because they're not as smart as us. Like, what would the woke people do? On one hand, he's a bad racist, but on the other hand, he's using his bad racism to do good things. Man in charge suspects he's black. Researching identical twins is a hell of a rabbit hole. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Years ago, I looked into that a little bit, and I just like, whoa. If memory serves, is identical twins being separated and going into different cultures, different families, the black family, white family, and that the white identical twins did better than the black identical twins, and it was controlled for culture. Thanks for hanging out. Have a great weekend.